get a comment, which was, it's not you, it's them. Some people will take things the wrong and complete opposite way, no matter how well it's masterfully spelled out for them. And though I appreciate this approach of masterfully presenting something, masterful in your presentation does not mean it's masterfully understood. And this takes us back to our purpose. Oh, what is our purpose of communicating? We're often quick to point a finger and say, you misunderstood, which, sure, that might have existed, that actually occurred. But we rarely take the time to say, I communicated poorly. And so there's an agency and there's a certain sense of accountability when it comes to who is responsible. Because the truth is, we're all responsible. Anyone who's engaged in that moment, teacher, student, colleague, with other colleagues, employee, manager, two friends, relationships, family members, and obviously within ourselves, we are all responsible. It's not one person's responsibility entirely. And if there is a misunderstanding, if you cannot take a step back and say, could that have been my fault? Then you're not contributing to the solution. So how can we identify when a term is not clearly defined? How and when do we take responsibility to clarify and define those terms when we're speaking to somebody? And another part of it is, how do we encourage others to speak up and seek that clarification when there's a misunderstanding? Because again, it's everyone's responsibility. And yes, it's unavoidable, because those assumptions and mistakes that I had mentioned before, they happen so naturally that we really don't take them, we take it for granted, how much we think other people understand us based on whatever we're saying. And so it's likely that we will not communicate, that we will not define those things. But there are some tips for being able to clarify words and terms, especially loaded terms, especially terms that are instrumental in building a foundation, like in dance. What are the fundamentals? Doing something properly, and that are instrumental in healthy relationships. What is commitment? What does being present mean? All of these things, these are loaded terms, but because we hear them and use them so frequently, we diminish their meaning when we say them, but in reality, they mean a lot. And we need to be able to define those things. So when it comes to how we can approach that, first, I would say, is go in with good intentions. And one assumption, at least to start, which is that the other person that you're speaking to is also well-intentioned. Second is to create a safe space for questions. And that is in your tone, in your wording, in your presentation, in the environment that you create. Dance schools, for example, there are a lot of teachers who don't like to be questioned, especially in front of others. It's one thing to have a private lesson and ask the teacher something. It's another thing entirely, and how they respond will vary when you ask them in front of a large audience, a workshop, or a dance class. There are some teachers who don't like to be questioned, and so that is not a safe environment. Same thing with a personal relationship. If the person you are speaking to is or the person who's speaking to you that you need to clarify something with is quick to outbursts, that is not a safe environment. That doesn't encourage me to trust that I am allowed to speak freely. So that takes me to the next point, which is about emotions. There's nothing wrong with experiencing emotions, but there is an element of controlling how they are expressed, and to know when and where they should be inserted and how they should be inserted. So the more emotional you are, the less likely you're taking the time to have rational thought and to put some thought into your words and how you're actually expressing yourself. Those emotions might come out and they might cloud the words that you're using. They might they might muddle the definition that you are trying to create. There's also the never assume anything that is important to you is understood or important to someone else. And I can't stress this part enough. There are some things that are really important to some people, like timeliness, right? Timeliness for me is huge. I like people to be on time because I am on time. It's partial projection, yes, but it's also a request that I often make. Now, timeliness, when I say I'm going to be somewhere at a certain time and I express that to somebody, that depends on their idea of punctuality, right? How do they define punctual? Punctual for me is early. Punctual for some people is right on the dot. Punctual for others is give or take 30 minutes. So, how is that term defined? And if it is, in most cases, that's again loaded, punctual, right? That's a loaded term. It's important to me. And if it's really important to me, I want to make sure that I define that clearly. So if I speak to somebody else, I'm like, listen, this is what time we're meeting. Please do not be late. Like, I will be there 15 minutes earlier. Please don't be late. I really hate this. I don't like waiting for people, and I have other things that I could do. So please don't be like, I specify, I clarify what that means to me to be somewhere at a certain time so that we can have a shared understanding of punctuality. The other element is another tip is to take agency over your own growth. Right? No one will or should care more about you and your own growth than you do. Chances are no one will. Everyone will fall in line with whatever lowest standard and lowest bar that you set for yourself. There's many people who might want the best for you, but they will not push more than you push for yourself. So if you're in a situation where you don't understand something, don't walk out, especially if it's an important relationship or an important commitment like learning or teaching. Don't walk out. Don't give up right away. Start by asking some questions, right? And that's an element. Part of improving that communication and minimizing the misunderstandings that can take place is that active listening and asking clarifying questions. So, not just what do you mean? Because I get that from students too, just like I got that comment from Henry earlier. But you have to understand this is something that often comes from the teacher side, right? What do you mean? From the student side, don't what do you mean is so general. So the more specific you can get with your question, the more specific I can get with my answer and actually address the issue that you're having. What do you mean by fundamentals? If I did not explain it, sure. What do you mean by fundamentals in terms of the connection with the ground specifically? Oh, okay, cool. Let me explain that in detail. And then another tip is if you're on the receiving end of words, terms that are important to you, or you can see are important to somebody else, or you can understand the impact of those words as they pertain to your relationship, repetition. Take the time to repeat what you heard in your own words and your own understanding, because there are a lot of people who say, so you said that, that. Yeah, that's great. That is exactly what I said. Thank you very much. That didn't really help much. You want to actually be able to repeat that in your own words. You said this, and this is what I understand it to be. Am I correct? Is that what you meant? So, just a couple of tips.